And to talk a bit then about the French Justice Minister's trip to Algiers, Angela Diffley is with me here in the studio. And Angela, look, beyond the drug trafficking issue that we saw in that report, tell us a bit about the efforts then to improve relations.
Yeah, I've lost count of how many resets we've had. This is inevitably a complicated relationship. France, of course, the former colonial power in Algeria, then the Algerian War of Independence, which was particularly bloody. And there are a very high number of dual French-Algerian nationals living in France as a result of the deal that was made at the end of that Algerian War of Independence over who was allowed nationality. And many of those dual nationals live in low-income, high-crime suburbs on the outskirts of France's big cities. You know, they're at once the victims of crime and perpetrators of it. It is a very complicated relationship. And even in the time, if you just look at Emmanuel Macron's time in government, he went from when he was candidate and campaigning, saying that France's very presence, its colonial time in Algeria, was in itself a crime against humanity, a phrase which really caused a lot of shock amongst many French people who were in Algeria, aside from the status of their presence in Algeria. They were working as nurses, doctors, teachers, and felt they were doing something very useful. And there was a lot of backlash. Now, Macron went from that sort of statement to then a couple of years back saying that successive Algerian governments had used France as an excuse. They had blamed any problems in Algeria. They scapegoated that, used France as the reason for all evils in Algeria and their failure to run a proper economy, a proper government, a country that people found successful. This was Macron's next stage. And, you know, then more recently, France decided to take the side of Morocco in the disputed area of Western Sahara. Morocco claims sovereignty over it. France has backed Morocco's sovereignty in Western Sahara. Algeria always backed the pro-independence Polisario front, the Polisario front. And so that really annoyed the Algerians. Then we had a recalling of ambassadors. The kind of issues where these clashes are manifested or where both sides refuse to cooperate because of this background tend to be on Algeria refusing to take back expelled nationals who have both nationalities, France refusing to grant visas to Algerians who wish to come and study in France. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of tit-for-tat weaponry that is used, if you like. And Algeria still wants France to open the records over the extremely bloody Algerian War of Independence and open the records fully so that allegations of crimes against humanity and war crimes can be studied properly by historians. There are allegations on both sides. So that's something of this very, very difficult background between the two. This particular visit, Gérald Darmanin was Interior Minister, which is much more about visas and those sort of problems. This is purely judicial. The Algerians are likely, if they cede anything, to want the extradition of a former industry minister in Algeria. They want to get back his, they say, criminally gained assets.
And look, you say this is a trip focused pretty much on judicial issues, and there is one individual, though, here in France who we suspect the French delegation will be campaigning for on this trip. That is Christophe Glaise, a journalist who is being held in prison in Algeria.
Yes, his family are very hopeful that something might come out of this better relationship between Gérald Darmanin and the Algerian government rather than the previous ministers dealing with this issue. They're hoping very much for that. He was arrested, sentenced under Algerian law for apology for terrorism. He was doing a report on a football team in the Kabylia region, which was a heartland in the previous civil war in Algeria. He has been in prison. He recently dropped his appeal in the highest Algerian court, and there is some hope that he might be granted a presidential pardon. That is a common pattern in these sort of situations. Darmanin sounded quite hopeful. Somebody asked him whether Christophe Glaise, who's very often a sports reporter, would be home in time for the World Cup, and he was unclear about that, but sounded hopeful. There is hope that something useful might come out for the family on that.